Ty Brady here with Brady Insurance Marketing in the Ty Brady Way. As a successful entrepreneur myself, I'm passionate in helping other entrepreneurs do the same as they rise from rags to riches and get inspired each week on the stories they tell here at the Ty Brady Way. Welcome back to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. Today we're doing a remote podcast show with Glenn Poulos. And, I got a chance to meet him and talk to him a little bit before we do the show. And I love it where, he's sold businesses. He's helped people with the sales process, and he's wrote a book. So, Glenn, tell me a little bit about why you do what you do and your story. So let's start there.
Well, the funny thing is that I wasn't always doing this. When I went to school for electronics, I got a job with the federal government, fixing stuff. And I did that for a few years. And one day the manager of my department in the civil service pulled me aside and said, you're in the wrong field. You should probably be selling. And, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to offend any civil servants on the call, but, he said I didn't fit the mold. And so I took the guy at his word, and I decided to, make the leap into sales in 1985. And,
wow.
It makes me old, right? Although I don't feel old, I guess I'm just getting up there, right? So it's almost 40 years now that I've been selling. And, I got a job in sales in 85, and I worked for a company for 6 years, and I approached the owners, and I realized the owners were making a lot more money than I was, right? And I thought, well, maybe I could spin off a division of their company and, help them to expand into another company, and I'd get a chance to own a piece of something, a startup, right? And I approached the owners, and they said, oh, no, that'll never work. And so instead of, and they said, just stick to your job and you're doing great and, don't worry. But the next day I actually just up and quit my job. And the funny part of the story is that I'd only been married for 6 days at the time.
Oh. And
I forgot to tell my wife that I was quitting. And, I went home and I said, oh, honey, I've quit my job. I'm going to start a business. And then, of course, she almost passed out. Right. And, that was in 1991. And, I was really, really motivated to want to try to start something before I turned 30, right? Because I thought if I turn 30, maybe it'll be 40 before I get to it, right? So I was 29 and a half, and, I started a business, and it was based on this newfangled technology called the cell phone, right? Which, of course, that never went anywhere, right? Who needs a cell phone, right? And so the business was sort of selling equipment to the companies that operate cell phone networks. So in the US, it's like T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. And of course, in Canada, it's like Bell, Telus, and Rogers. And, we were selling to companies across North America that were building, maintaining, and operating a cellular network. And the only thing we didn't sell was cell phones. And so, the business grew really well. And 15 years later, I sold the company, and I got a chance to start another company in 2007. And we were able to do a similar type of business, but just slightly different, right? And so the funny thing is I grew that company for another 15 years. And in 2022, in February, I sold that company to a private equity firm in the US. And I agreed to take a job with them. So I went from, sort of 30 years of being an entrepreneur and running my own thing to actually having a job with a 9 to 5. And so now I work for the company that bought my company back in a couple years ago. Right. And so it's been quite the roller coaster over those 30 years. I learned a lot, and, I took some notes along the way, and I decided to write a book, and I published that, a couple years ago as well. It's called Never Sit in the Lobby. And, so that's kind of like the quick version, trying to get 30, 40 years out in a couple of minutes, right? So.
Yeah. So you're on this journey called life, right? And what, a couple things I want to point out is, whether a decision is made, meaning you made a decision and, 6 days being married and you decided to burn the ship, right? You talked to Napoleon Hill. I love that, where he burned the ship. Mine was, my journey was forced, right? but you've been through the sales, and I know somebody said if you're in sales and you get a high from closing that deal, you're in the right business. How do you go from in sales, growing two successful businesses, and then to writing a book? I mean, what led you to that?
Yeah. So I was lucky that when the company that I joined, it was a company of four. There was four owners in the business, and each one of them was actually a formidable sales guy. Like they were all really top-notch sales guys, and of course they became my mentors, and and I followed them around trying to learn. Hey, how do I go from being a government worker to a salesman, right? And believe me, that's a big leap. And so I started to learn from these guys, and I learned that they did a lot of things over and over again. They had habits which led them towards sort of success, right? Like they'd follow certain rules, and by following those rules and doing them over and over again, they tended to get similar results, right? And so I started writing those rules down in the 80s, and actually kept writing them down. And over time, I started sharing these rules that I would make up names for them, funny names and funny stories, sort of to try to go with them, to remember them. And people started asking me to, hey, can you come to my work and go over your rules and da da da. And then of course people are like, oh, you should write a book and da, da, da. And so of course I never did until the pandemic hit, and that was when I started to sit down, and I had the time, being locked up for so long, sort of to dedicate it to it. But I had this giant workbook that I kept all those years, writing all these rules down, and I just took the rules and then just expanded them all into chapters. And excuse me, sorry. And the subtitle is 57 tips on how to build a business and a career in selling, right?
Yeah.
And and so that's sort of how it came about. It's just basically the 57 rules I'd written down since 1985 on how not to screw it up. Now, some of these rules are don't do it. Some of the rules are do it, right? Like, and because you learn a lot of ways not to do it correctly when you're out in the field as well, right? So.
In my industry, I find a lot of people want to reinvent the wheel. And I'm like, reinvent the wheel after you've seen success with the proven people that have done it. So,
right.
Before you decide to like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, at least give the proven system a shot. And I get it. The proven system may have some tweaks or some nuances. I mean, you said you worked for a company and you went to them and they're like, this idea is never going to work, right? So then you quit your job and you make it work anyway. But why the title of the book, Never Sit in the Lobby?
Yeah. So I realized that, when I was going to the lobby, and even to this day, if you would sit down in the lobby, you would, especially nowadays, people get distracted with their phone, right? And you're sitting there monkeying around on your phone. Your wife's texting you, don't forget the milk, and, stop and pick this up, and da da da. And you're like looking at Facebook and, messing around. And all of a sudden, some guy comes in and he's towering over you because you're sitting down. He's standing up and he's like, hey, are you Glenn? And of course I'm distracted and I look up and I have to rise up to this guy, right? And I realized that it was better to show up on time, announce yourself, and to stand in the lobby. Like, don't sit in the lobby. Don't be distracted. Don't be reading magazines. Don't be on your phone. Just wait for your guy to show up. And then when he shows up, you're ready to shake his hand and, and get on with what you're doing. And there's a quick rule that goes along with that, right? And when you're there and when he walks in, always have something in your hand and something in your mind, right? It's another golden rule. Like, I always show up. I never walk in empty-handed, right? Sometimes it might be a quote or, literature, product bulletin, something glossies. Or sometimes it might be, mouse pads or coffee mugs or pens or golf balls, whatever we're giving away that month, right? And I always have something in my hand to hand to the person. And I have something in my mind that I want to talk to them about. Like, hey, here's our new mouse pad. Give it a try. It's awesome. And by the way, I wanted to drop in today and talk to you about our new, Wizomatic, right? I know you guys are installing a new production line, et cetera, right? Depends on what you're selling, right? It could cater to whatever kind of products you're selling, right? So,
wow.
So those are a couple rules, and there's of course 55 more, right?
Well, I can tell you that I lost a job, interview because I was sitting in the lobby. And I just reminded me, because I had a headhunter hit me up back when I got a background in construction, and the headhunter, does the follow up, why didn't you hire my guy, blah, blah, blah. They said, one, he looked distracted, and two, he was sitting in the lobby. And I'm thinking I'm doing everything right. But that was why I lost the job. Crazy.
Wow. Huh? Yeah. Well, there you go. So that's, proof's in the pudding there. So
I do like it how we talk in my industry, I talk about insurance agents going into businesses and building a referral partner, and that's smart. Take something, coffee mug. I always say, take a Diet Coke, find out what the receptionist likes to drink, eat, and you're going to get, because the gatekeeper is not going to let you talk to the person that makes decisions if you don't get past her. And her job is to basically keep you out. So you're like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And so the funny thing about that is that, a lot of times well, I'll back up a little bit, right? So sometimes, you have a guy on the phone and he says, oh yeah, I'm interested in your Wizomatic, and why don't you just send me a brochure? And so at that point, what I always say is, you know what? Funny thing is, I'm going to be in your building on the next Thursday. Why don't I drop it off? And he's like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm like, look, I'll just drop in the lobby. And he's like, okay, fine, drop in the lobby, but I'm really busy. And I'm like, okay. So I know that week, next Thursday, I'm going to be in his building. So one, I'm going to call any other customers in that business that I deal with, and I'm going to make other appointments to see them. And I'll say, hey, Jack asked me for a brochure on the Wizomatic. I'm going to be there showing him this amazing new product. Can I get 5 minutes on your calendar? I just want to bring you up to date on what's new. And usually I can get 2 or 3 customers, because we're selling to big businesses that deal with us in many ways. And so there's more than one guy in a business that I'm talking to, right? So a week goes by, and I show up on Thursday, and I've got his information that he wants, and I show up in the lobby, and the first thing the receptionist says to me is, the gatekeeper is like, oh, is he expecting you? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he is expecting me. He asked me to drop off this literature. And so she's like, okay, fine. So she calls Jack and says, hey, Jack, Glenn's in the lobby. And the guy forgot a week ago and he told me he was too busy. And 99 times out of 100, he'll pop down and get the brochure. Yeah. And guess what? I'm not sitting in the lobby. I'm standing, and I've got something in my hand and something in my mind. And so, then I show it to him. And, and like I said, he forgot that he was too busy to come down, and he came down anyways. And, and then I have my other little golden rule, which always gets a laugh out of people. It's called always ask for a mini tour. And people are like, what the hell is a mini tour, Glenn? And I'm like, well, a mini tour is a tour that's mini, meaning it doesn't take all afternoon. You're not getting on and off a bus, driving around a city, looking at the sites. It's a quick tour. Show me where you're going to use my equipment. Show me what's new. And the guy looks at me like, mini tour, what's that? Right. And I'm like, hey, I know you're putting in this new equipment. Can you show me where it's going to be set up? I just want to eyeball it, and then I can make recommendations. And again, 99 times out of 100, if you make it sort of casual and, and you're sort of, compatible with what you're saying, he'll give you the little tour. And that's when you get to practice my next little rule, which is never forget a face. And so when I'm not sitting in the lobby, if I'm there 10 minutes early, I whip out my phone and I look at that customer. I'm at Acme Manufacturing, and I say, who do I know at Acme? Right? And I know, okay, Bob, Jack, Bill, Sally. And I remember what they look like, and I remember their face, because I might not have seen them for 6 months, right? So I go back into my incredible memory, which is very long and deep, but takes a long time to access, right? And I pull that image of their face back to the forefront of my memory. And then that way, when he's taking me on the mini tour and I bump into Sally and then she says, hey, Glenn, good to see you, I don't have that momentary lapse of who the hell is that again, right? And she could see it in your face, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, this fucking guy didn't remember my name. What a jerk, right? Or I'm like, I beat her to the punch. I'm like, hey, Sally, how are you, right? And and then she's got to remember who I am, right? And then she remembers, oh my God, yeah, that's Glenn. He's such a pleasure to do business with, right? And and he remembered my name. People love it when you remember their name. They just do, right?
People love hearing their name.
Yeah.
I coach a lot of youth sports, and I will try and yell "good job" to any kid that's out there, or they love hearing their name. And it's interesting. And my boy this weekend we played 17 games of lacrosse. He's like, "Dad, I couldn't hear you." I'm like, "You couldn't hear me." Usually I get in trouble for yelling too much, right? But I make sure, and now I started like yell their name and do a thumbs up, like make sure they see me, visually see me, right?
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah. So it
they say
makes a huge difference, right?
What's that, Glenn?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, right? And while you're on the mini tour, right? The reason I want the mini tour is so I can see, is this guy like looking, is he got like the 9 of the competitors boxes lined up there ready to go and he just wants a 10th one? Or, like whose mouse pads is he, and coffee mugs and stuff have been there before me, dropping stuff off, right?
Yeah.
And so, I find it to be, you got to get back past that lobby door in order to see what they're really doing there, right? And you can see who the competitors are, what other stuff's already in play, stuff like that, right?
So you write this book, and I know
Yeah.
that you take tidbits over your 40 years of sales experience. When somebody said, Glenn, what is the number one thing? And it's different for everybody, I think. But what's the number one thing you would say?
Well, a lot of times when people ask me that, I always say this: the number one thing that I always share with people is my golden rule, which is you only get forever to make another impression. And people are always like, no, that's not what it is. It's, you got to make a good first impression. And that's what my mom taught me. And I'm like, yeah, that is what my mom taught me too. But then I realized in business, every impression is a first impression. And so, when you're at work, and this applies to whether you're in sales or in any kind of capacity, and the boss walks by, you always want to look like you're the best employee that he's ever seen, right? Because if he walks by and he sees you on Facebook, even for like a microsecond, he thinks you're a bum. He thinks you're a bum, right? And so, always be making a good impression, right? And so if your company does trade shows or anything like that, always be willing to help. Show up early, help them set up, stay late and help them tear it down. And when you're in the booth, don't be sitting around complaining that your feet are sore. Be out in the aisle, grabbing customers, pulling them into your booth, right? Talking to the product managers about why they're there and what are the new products and how, what makes everything great. And these things make huge differences to your career path, because when it comes up for, when they're looking for someone that they need to pull in a staff member for this, that, or the other thing, you're going to stay in their mind. That Glenn guy, he's always on, man. He's always so busy at trade shows. He's always visiting customers, so that's my golden rule, is always make a good impression, and always be a pleasure to do business with. Even when you lose the business, don't be a prick about it, right? Like basically you have to learn how to win and lose graciously, right? And,
well, you got to take the failures and realize here's what people, I think I always like to do a debrief. What could I have done that I didn't do to get that deal? Because it'll make you better. And another thing is I've listened to Deion Sanders' books, and he says, if you look good, you play good. If you play good, they pay good, right? And he says he always talks about setting out his wardrobe the day before he went to play or see. So it reminded me of you saying you got to look good, show up, right? Show up early.
Yeah.
Don't be the first one to leave. All those things.
Exactly.
Be memorable.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You got it. That's right.
I love it.
Yeah.
So now you're working for a business that you're an employee. Where's the next 5 years taking you, Glenn?
Well, I mean, so I sold my business to these guys, and I agreed to stay for a few years, and so that's been 2.5 years ago. So I probably have about another 2.5 years in me, and then I'm hoping I'll, in quotation marks, semi-retire, and hopefully at that point I can, maybe continue to tell the story from the book, maybe write a part 2, what I learned about selling my business, and and that kind of a thing. And I'd love to do some public speaking or, a small bit of consulting here and there for
when consulting, like sales or processes or like all the above?
Will play out. So,
I will say this is I deal with a demographic that is aging, baby boomers, and I see people that have been very successful in their careers. I'm talking very, very successful. And the one thing that I always tell them is when you go to retire, find your next passion, whether it's, coaching new sports, whether it's, you want to go on a mission, but do something because you worked 40 years, 9 to 5 or even longer. You need to, you got your best years left. And sometimes it's sad because I've seen people pass away because with a lot of money in the bank and they didn't travel, they didn't do anything. And it just breaks my heart. The universe, you can make an impact, and the information's out there, right? And it's repackaged and put out there, and maybe in a little bit different way or a different strategy that's relatable to someone or something. Man, but I love the, never stand in the lobby. I love take something with you, have something in mind, and the mini tour. I mean, I learned something new today, that I can pass on to some of my sales team. I've got 3,000 to 5,000 agents nationwide, and it's a sales process. And I was also reminded, where we're calling leads and somebody says, well, just send it to me in the mail. And, how to overcome objections and all these things are just spinning in my mind about how can we be better human beings. And they say your net worth is who you know, right? Who are your closest people, and who do you circle? Who's that circle of influence to get in front of people and remembering people? I'm also reminded is I have a photographic memory, and it drives my wife crazy sometimes, but it comes back to me when I was a child when I had to learn to sight read because I'm dyslexic, and that's why I had to ask you how to say your last name, Glenn. And if I don't know it, I just don't pronounce it. I can't hear the vowels. So, you can make those weak things become strong for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're wrapping up here. Any last thoughts, one, and then two, how somebody may be able to get in contact with you, whether they want to, get your book and they get it on Amazon. And then if they wanted to reach out to you about, talking to their teams, so whatever you'd like to leave and how they get in contact with you, it'll also be posted in the links when we publish this on the Podbean. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, the easiest way to get a hold of me is, I have a website, glennpoulos.com, easy enough. And, you can link to all my socials there. You can link to the book if you want to have check it out, which would be great. I would love that. And if you want to communicate or collaborate or discuss or question me in any way, LinkedIn's the best way. I'm, super active on LinkedIn. You'll see that if you check out my profile. You can connect with me there, and we can conversate. And happy to talk to anybody about anything. And I'm super approachable. So you can check me out on my website or LinkedIn. And and if you want to check out the book, you can get it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. So.
Is there an audio book? I listen to audiobooks quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Every kind, hard copy, soft copy. There's an ebook. And also the audio book for sure.
Audiobook. Well, I really appreciate being on the show today. Thank you for your time. And Glenn, it's been a pleasure. I just, I got a lot of great takeaways that I know that I'm going to implement some of those things when I train, and encourage people to go and read your 57. I mean, you only shared a handful, like 6, I think. But it's and some of the don'ts to do. I'm curious to see what those are.
Yeah, well, I think you'll enjoy them, and you can pick up the book at any point, flip to any page, read a rule, put it down, pick it up again, read another one. You don't have to read them all at once, and you don't have to start at the beginning. You can flip to any page, and some of them are pretty funny, and some of them, are pretty stark, right? So there's some good rules in there. So yeah, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Well, Glenn, it's been a pleasure. As always, share, like, and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one. And just to let you know, as you subscribe, you'll get notifications of all the new episodes that drop each week. So go ahead and subscribe to the show, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. As always, share, like, and subscribe. Go to Instagram at ty.r.brady. And as always, love hearing from you. And let me know what you want to learn on the show or what you'd like me to bring up on the show. Thanks.
You can find the Ty Brady Way on Instagram as well as Facebook. To stay connected with giveaways and Ty himself, go ahead and follow at ty.r.brady on Instagram as well as Facebook. This podcast was recorded, edited, and produced by Whitney Face Media Marketing. And the theme music is an excerpt from Hot Chicken of the Woods by Isaac Joel.